Good afternoon and good afternoon. I am Dr. James Smith Jr. and welcome to another edition of the Dr. James Show. You guys can't see me off camera, but every time the intro music comes on, I'm bobbing and dancing and getting my groove on. Why? Because we have another phenomenal, compelling guest today. But before we get to that person, how about a little bit of alumni love? Check this out. Hey everybody, it's Dr. James back with another edition of Alumni Love. Now, you know, on the Dr. James Show, we love our alumni real hard, and we're about to pour out that love to Charmaine Brown, our alum. Charmaine, what's going on? What has happened since the last time you were on the Dr. James Show?
Dr. James, thank you. Thank you for the love. It's so wonderful to be back with you. Since the last time I was on the Dr. James Show, I have had the opportunity to build up diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for several Fortune 500 companies, for utility companies. I've stood up diversity, equity, and inclusion for a local county government, stood up diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to one of the biggest mortgage associations in the country. And I am now in an accretive role at the Finance of America companies, where I'm Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And so I am now given an opportunity to build once again. And the company is very comprehensive. So, you know, I'll get to use my business skills along with all of the DEI skills that I've gained over the years. So it's been pretty exciting, Dr. James, I have to admit.
You don't slow down, do you?
Do you? I mean, anybody who knows Dr. James knows you've got to keep it. I mean, you got to keep it going. You got to keep it real. So I tell you, I just have to try to keep up with you. But the love that, we get from being part of the alumni is just incredible. And I'm just so happy for the opportunity to catch you up.
Absolutely. Well, we're sending positive vibes, keeping you in our prayers. And we know you're going to do the darn thing, CB.
Thank you, Dr. James.
Good. We'll talk soon. Take care.
All right. You too. Stay well.
We do love our alumni. Let's get to our guest. Her name is Petra Velzeboer. She is a mental health expert. She is a TEDx speaker, a business owner, mother, CEO of her own mental health consultancy called PVL. Phenomenal. And I can't wait to bring her out. Before we do though, watch this clip. This clip begins to tell the backstory of Petra.
Petra Velzeboer is a mental health consultant, executive coach, psychotherapist, and of course also a podcast host, growing up with no education inside a religious cult. Wow. Welcome, Petra. Welcome.
Stand up if mental health has impacted your life in some way. We sort of have a monthly call because we're all remote, right? And our first question is always, how's your mental health been this month? And I have to start, so I lead by example in talking about my mental health, and I'm normalizing the conversation about good mental health. Previously, our fight or flight response came in when predators were at us. Nowadays, our fight or flight response comes in when we get a terrorist attack on the other side of the world and we're essentially safe.
Welcome to the Dr. James Show, Petra Velzeboer. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. What a great intro. Thank you.
Well, you're making it happen. You certainly are. Now, you're in London right now, correct?
Absolutely. London. It's dark outside already.
Well, thank you for coming on after working a full day. We can't wait to dive into your story. Now, on the video, the narrator said that you were born and raised in the infamous Children of God religious cult. I want to start there. Questions include, what was that like? What was the impact on you? And when we hear cult, right away, people tend to think negative, possessed, or monsters. So can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and the impact it had
Of
on
course.
you?
Absolutely. So of course I was born into the situation. Great. So you've got some images there. Those are my parents, and that's me, the odd one out. You can tell with my blended sort of family sibling group. Now people think, like you said, immediately go to the negatives. They think of David Koresh. They think of violence. They think of Armageddonists. All these sorts of things. And while some of this is true, there were bits of my childhood that were amazing. So we grew up in communes. There were lots of people. I grew up in India, Brazil, Kenya, Russia, sort of all over Europe. And, the one thing that I realized later that I was sort of missing out on was an education. We didn't go to school. And part of that was because my parents and the religious organization did think the world was going to end. So they thought there was always a 3-year timeline for some reason. And it was interesting to see you say the impact, the after effects, where many of us, the idea of doing a 3-year degree, for example, or getting into education in the first place, investing in our future or a pension just seems so far out of our sort of reach. Because when we were kids, we were never asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was not a question that was ever asked. So there was a little bit of both. There was the fun bits, and then it did get dark and more manipulative and controlling as time went on.
What was it like living in a blended family? And how did your mom and dad meet? I know there's a story there.
Of course, yeah. So my mom's Dutch, and I was 2 years old when she met my stepfather, who's from Atlanta, Georgia. They actually met in Brazil. So they had both joined and again, it started in the 70s. It started with loads of idealism, like, why are we just thinking about God in a church building? We should be out, we should be building community. So essentially it drew a lot of people that were idealistic. And so from the age of 2, this was my family. And so my brother that you saw in the picture, I always thought that he was my twin because we were the same age. And people would sort of joke about it. But as a kid, you couldn't get that there was any difference. And there's my dear brother. You want to make me cry on this show, don't you? Seeing all the pictures. And so we grew up not really knowing, and I know it's not sort of PC to say you don't know the difference with color. Like, I don't see color. That's actually not a useful thing. And I had to learn that over time, that actually just because we saw each other as family didn't mean that our experience in life was the same, or the opportunities that we received were the same, even though we all grew up without an education and sort of in that situation. So it was normal, but we certainly got a lot of attention. I think my parents got a bit of judgment as well from both communities, but then in the commune, none of that mattered. None of that mattered. So this is what the magic was, I guess, in the early days. But it's only later, in speaking to my siblings about how our experiences even then were somewhat different, that it sort of opened my eyes to that difference, I guess.
This is powerful. If you want to join the party, join the show, questions for Petra, please put them in the chat room. Trust me, you're going to have some. Now, Petra, based on my little research, something happened at 11. That was a turning point for you, correct?
So, well, it was sort of as a teenager in general that I started questioning things. So I started wondering, the things that they've said or promised didn't quite come true, or what did I believe in? But I actually got really good at leading a double life.
Tell me about that double life thing.
Yeah, so just survival. Like, we all survived in different ways, and mine was actually to play really small, to be as invisible as possible, which is hilarious now that I make a living on stage. But at the time, I was like, if I just keep just below the radar, nobody will notice me, either for good or for bad. Like, the best survival tool for me was to be as invisible as possible. Now, there was corporal punishment. I mean, think about it. Our generation, we were being raised to be God's end time soldiers. So there was a lot of, in some of the bigger communes within those ages, just lots of strict rules, lots of training, lots of indoctrination, and also seeing my peers being punished in front of me in a host of different ways, just made me go, all right, be quiet, zip it. That's your survival tool. But over time, as you probably know, the longer we are inauthentic, the longer we live with a mask that hides I didn't even have a chance to figure out who I really was. but I certainly knew not to show it or not to try and figure it out in a public domain. And that led to some pretty dark times for me.
Now, based on what I've learned, your parents broke up at some point, correct?
They did. So I was about 18 at the time. And so there was sort of a discrepancy with who wanted to be involved in the community and who didn't. And it was quite sudden because I thought we were strong. I thought that was the one thing in our family that helped us survive some of the
Sure.
situations that occurred, was the strength of our family unit and having a father in the picture. Now, many families didn't have a father in the picture. And I think that, you know, allowed for abuses and different things to be a bit more rife than it probably was for me.
Now, you turned 22, which is my favorite number, but that was a turning point time for you as well, correct?
So many turning times, Dr. James. There's
Hey,
like,
you were ready for the pandemic. You pivoted your entire life.
yeah, I feel like when the pandemic hit and everyone was like, oh my goodness, I was like, oh, all right. I feel like I've been preparing for this my whole life. I know. This is what the resilience you get, that you don't realize what it's doing for you. So yeah, at 22, I fell pregnant. And so this double life meant that on the one hand, I was actually being sort of leading and being trusted within the communities.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, one of my sisters had left already, and I was leading a hedonistic life of drugs, alcohol, escapism. I was just very confused. And then I was dating somebody outside of the community, which was not allowed. So that was another sort of secret. And then I fell pregnant with my son. And for about 3 months, I just didn't tell anybody, and I was confused about what I should do because my head was still very mixed up in sort of God's will, which was convoluted with the cult's will, if you know what I mean,
Mhm.
versus what was the right thing for me. And so that was the point that I then told the father of my child, the guy I was dating, and he, respect to him, I'm not with him anymore, but he said, come move to London, let's figure this out.
Wow.
So that, and that sounds like people always ask me, the question I often get is, how did you escape? That's always the question. It's like that. How did you escape? And we all picture, like, have you seen the Shawshank Redemption, the movie?
Yes, yes.
You know, he plans it and then he goes through the tunnel filled with all sorts of things that I'm not allowed to say on the show. And then he comes out and his like arms are out and the rain is falling and it's like freedom, right? And what people don't understand, like I almost envy that guy because he was now free. He was outside of the wall and that equated freedom. For us, the walls are on the inside. We could leave anytime we liked. Go, there's the door. But the thing was, but you will be ostracized from your community and family. You will be nobody. You will be punished. All, you know, it's the internal thing. So leaving actually ended up leading to the darkest times in my life. Because now all the trauma came up, all the overwhelm. Who am I? What matters? I've got a kid. I have no education, right? And it leads to alcohol addiction, depression, and suicidal ideation. This is where it led me. There you go. Oh, yeah. Wow. So that, and this picture is actually a little bit earlier. This is sort of at 19 when I was lost and confused as a teenager, but it actually isn't the picture that captures the darkest time. And sometimes when I talk, I kind of highlight those differences because I looked at just a little bit more like this because we work really hard when we're struggling the most to actually look like we're good. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so these were the kind of succession of rock bottom moments that I then went through.
You say you went through, you absorbed, it was, gosh, amazingly compelling. But then you talk about you were lucky.
Yeah.
You were lucky. Help us understand, where was the luck through all that turmoil?
Trust me, I spent years in a victim mentality. I spent years thinking, if I'd had an education, if my parents didn't join this, poor me, I'm stuck, I'm gonna keep drinking, there's no point to anything. So I definitely stayed stuck there for a while. And after I did the work to change my life slowly, let's be real, right? It's never an overnight epiphany and like that.
Well, you didn't get a 6-pack of abs by doing 2 sit-ups?
by watching Instagram and then like drinking something? No. No, it's the messy middle. It's like, even when you make the decision, it's the daily decisions that then support you to move forward. So why was I lucky? Because now, as a therapist and as a coach, and have worked with, thousands of people over the last years, I've realized that there's so many people who are stuck in this middle bit. It never gets so bad that they're like forced to wake up and do something. It's like, oh, it's just mediocre. It's a bit awful. I'm not fulfilled. I'm going to rationalize why that is. I'm in a relationship that doesn't serve me. I'm doing a job that doesn't fulfill me, and we just go, well, it's a paycheck. Well, it's, at least I'm not alone. Aren't you? Is my argument. And so the luck for me was that it actually got as dark as it did, because in a way that forces you to make some tough decisions. Unfortunately, some people may take their lives at that time. But for me, it was like, it's sink or swim. I'm either going to lose my life or I'm going to make something of it. And this kind of acted as a driver for me to do the work and go like, well, I survived that. What am I going to do? How am I going to make that worth something?
Essentially, what I'm hearing is you're saying lead by example. We have a little clip that we're going to show of you speaking to this, and then I'd like for you to speak more to it. Let's take a look.
We can't fix other people. We can only fix ourselves. And I don't want to imply that we're broken. I don't mean it like that. I just mean we can only work on ourselves in order to evolve and reach our full potential. And I believe that it's very important for us to lead by example in being vulnerable and brave and telling our stories, so that we give permission to other people to do the same. So I was born into and raised in the infamous Children of God cult. People in my generation who were raised the way I was felt trapped in their own minds, even though they left, and were never able to come to terms with the things that had happened.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. I want to continue to give life to those words.
Absolutely. And because this has informed my whole mental health business. And it's not about telling people what to do or fixing people, or as a leader or a manager having the perfect formula for helping others. And during the pandemic, so many of our friends and ourselves have been struggling. So what is the key difference that helps create mentally healthy families, work cultures, and all the rest of it? And I've discovered that it is living our best lives. Now, I used to have a quote on my phone that said, the best revenge is living a good life. Now that got me through a decade of like getting a master's degree, studying at night, raising my kids, quitting drinking, right? And then over time, I was able to let that go because I didn't need the revenge kind of vibe coming out of it anymore. But it still had the essence of truth, which is, work on, what's the saying? Make your side of the street clean first.
That's right,
before,
that's right.
Right. And so it felt like, how can I learn and model, practice, experiment with what helps my mental health? Now, even when I'm going to work with someone else, that's not a formula for them. It's just saying, hey, how can I support you to experiment with what works for you? And different things will work at different stages in our life. So leading by example in our families, in our workplaces, is the key to being happier, to thriving, but also taking radical responsibility for ourselves, no matter what's in our past. And that's the other kind of essence of it.
Wow, wow. We can go on. However, we do have friends that are out there. Let me go to the chat room. We got several. Tim says, Petra, if it's appropriate to share, what would you be able to be specific about some of the abuses that occurred that you were speaking about? So
Sure,
I guess he wants you to go a little deeper.
He wants me to go deep. Okay. No problem, Tim. Well, I mean, if you Google the Children of God, which then became the Family International, there are reams of information about child abuse. It was known as a free love cult. So it was quite sexualized. And so for people at quite a young age, especially when there were, maybe narcissists or more manipulative type people that were attracted to this kind of environment, the rules that it was supposedly sort of underneath were just really variable, and it really depended which communes you lived in, and some real dark stuff happened to lots of people. For me, I think it was more the emotional and mental trauma. So one was watching people close to me dealing with, I would say, cruel and unusual punishment, like wearing big signs saying they were on silence restriction, they weren't allowed to talk, sometimes for months at a time, public spankings, isolation, exorcisms. Yeah. So because I was the quiet one, I often got away with not being the primary object, but it's that vicarious trauma of watching people. And then it's the really sneaky thinking. So like, we weren't given like the skills and tools to live life in the real world.
Right.
So I'd be second guessing myself all the time. Is this what normal people say? Is this what what do I believe in? If that wasn't the truth, how I'm just angry about not being given some guidance, right? So that I think that gives you a little flavor of the types of things that were going on.
And we think we have it bad. Wow. Mental anguish, mental every day. Another question, how do you stop living under the radar? How do you stop living under the radar?
I love that question.
And it's a question that ties into where I was going to go next when talking about the secret deadline you gave yourself.
Yeah.
So if you can address the question, and hopefully it'll take us to that secret deadline.
So the secret deadline and how do you stop? Well, I'll go to the secret deadline first, because I guess I was still living a little bit under the radar when that happened, basically trying to numb and avoid. And my drug of choice was alcohol. So anything to not think or feel, because it was too overwhelming and too scary to be above the radar. So I ended up, I'd gone through many rock bottom moments. I'd put my own kids in danger. I repeatedly put myself in danger. So you know how the victim becomes the perpetrator kind of cycle? Like that's what was happening, and it was terrifying. And so I would then drink to, deal with the guilt and all of that. And so I gave myself this 1-year deadline to take my life. And for some reason, I woke up that day and I just thought, I can't do another day. Like I was done. I couldn't conceive of it. And so for some reason, this thought came, and this isn't, advice for other people, but it's not my clinical advice, but for some reason that thought meant I had a way out. And in a way it liberated me within that year to test and experiment with things that would support me. But I didn't have to be attached, because I didn't have a way out, because I did have a way out.
Hold on one second. I want to show a clip of you sharing and highlighting what exactly happened during that 1-year challenge.
Sure. And then something happened 6 years later. So this is a long stretch of time, right? To be this unhappy and to be, talking to people about your victim story so that they can reinforce that belief system of who you are. And I woke up one day, and I don't know why this happened this day and it hadn't happened before, but I was at the end and I was done. I was finished. And I realized then that I had this choice, this little seed of an idea sort of dripped into my mind, and it grew over the sort of next following days. And that little idea was, what if I postponed taking my life for 1 year? 1 year I would postpone taking my life. Don't ask me why it was a year, it wasn't 6 months, anything else. But what happened was I determined that in that year, I had nothing left to lose. I had two choices in my mind: to end everything or to experiment in this way. So I had a choice. And in that year, I determined to experiment and test all of those well-being tools, everything that was out there, in order to figure out if there was a way, even with my past, to live the life that I wanted. That was the challenge. Now,
woo, you didn't jump off a bridge, go skydiving. You said, I'm gonna postpone ending it for a year to see if I can come out. So what happened? What happened after that year?
So that year came and went, and people go like, was it in your calendar? Did you have an alarm set? Was it, no, because it's the year, but all you can do in those dark moments is 1 day at a time, 1 minute at a time. So the year was a bit arbitrary, and then it was like, test the thing, just do one thing, just do one thing. But then that, life wasn't perfect after that year. It wasn't the fanfare and the like, I'm good, I made it, right? It was more like a gentle noticing and going, this is this date, right? That time's passed. And what I learned is we can teach ourselves to be happy.
Mm.
We
Can you
teach
say it
ourselves.
again? Can you say
Yeah.
that again?
We can teach ourselves to be happy. We can develop the mindset to focus our attention on the good in our life and to take radical responsibility to change things. Now, that was the most profound lesson that has now impacted the rest of my life as I continue to move forward.
I love what you said about radical responsibility.
Radical.
And I think that ties in or addresses the question about how do you stop living a life of victimhood? Slowly but surely taking radical responsibility for what's happening.
Yeah, and I always say, practice bravery every day. Practice courage every day. And that could mean, it used to mean saying something in an AA meeting. It used to be just showing up. It used to be making a phone call that was difficult to make, right? And now I speak on stages in front of hundreds of people. But so it's like the snowball effect. That one small thing today stacks up over time, or, you know, and then suddenly you're visible, but it's not suddenly, right? It's because you put the work in every day over time, one thing that scares you, and build on it.
Through my research, I mean, everything I read, I kept going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. You talk about the scariest part of the story, and we're going to show a clip from that segment as well. Let's take a look.
But now the scariest part of the story actually comes next. Okay, remember that thing I said about mediocrity, and that's actually where the real sort of monster is? That's what happened next. Life got good. Life got good. I got sober. I got an education. I got a job. I got married. My kids were safe. We lived in a house. Life was good. But there was something inside me. There was that little voice. There was that little bit of anxiety, that frustration, something inside me that I couldn't numb anymore or turn the volume down through alcohol and all the rest of it. And I knew that something had to change and that this couldn't be it. I didn't come this far and work this hard to get to this place just to be safe and not actually thrive in some sort of way. I didn't know what it was. So in 2016, I sat my husband down and I told him I had to leave. And I told him I didn't know why, and that I knew it would be hard, and that I didn't know if I was just addicted to struggle, if that's what was happening. But I knew within me that if I didn't change something then, even then, that because I was lucky enough to have experienced that rock bottom moment, well, I could slide into that.
Wow. Well, Petra, I like to say that I live my life walking on a tightrope with no net. You got me beat.
You know what it's like.
You got me.
I know you do.
Wow, the courage. The courage. And
I don't actually watch that back, Dr. James. So I haven't watched it back much since it came out there. So you've got me there. And I'm like, who is this person?
I see brave. I see courage. I see someone who chose to be radically responsible for her outcomes, not blaming, not victim, owning your choices. How often do you think about? And actually, that was your TED Talk. That was posted in September. This is November. You have close to 100,000 views. Hey, go check it out. It's amazing. Go check it out. How often do you think about your past or what went into getting to today? The 2.0, 3.0 version of Petra?
So I've got friends and of course my siblings who are still in my life. We're spread around the globe, but we connect. So people from the past who have been in the struggle, we're the ones who see each other the most, as in, you know, when we're with each other, we see each other, you know what I mean? Because we understand the struggle. So I've got some of those people in my life. Not all of them. Some of them got stuck in the victimhood. So that's not the place that I sort of live. But I'll tell you where.
I love your statement. When we're with each other, we see each other.
Yes.
With everyone vying for the mic.
Yeah.
In this world, you guys, we're there for
immediately.
Each other. Wow.
It'll always be family, no matter who we are or which parents or which country we grew up in. Our experience is too close, you know, and I would do anything in a heartbeat for any of them, no matter what situation they were in, just because we all need a leg up, and we didn't necessarily have that. Pay it forward, right?
That's what we say.
pay it forward. You made me lost my train of thought. I'm all emotional over here now.
No, I'd ask you about how often do you think about what you've gone through to get to the version of yourself?
Sometimes I forget, like, let's be real. Like, sometimes I'm in the struggle now as the CEO of a company during a pandemic, and I'm like, this is hard, right? And then I have to go, and I'll tell you where I see it. I see it in the eyes of my kids. Now, my son is turning 18 in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And so every marker point of moving house, achieving something, he's so wise. And to think there was a time when I didn't want him. And he's the wisest person in my life. And he'll say, he'll say it. Look how far you've come. I'm so proud of you.
Wow.
From my son.
So he knows the story.
He does know the story. Slowly. It took a while, and I wanted to make sure, because I've got a daughter as well, she's a bit younger, that it was kind of appropriate bits as they were curious. And, you know, but now we've talked about generational trauma, right? We've talked about a whole host of things that he's able to kind of think about and reads deeper into. But that's the real driving force, because remember, I was an alcoholic parent. My kid, as a mother, you are judged more deeply than if a man was doing that. You are judged like you are the dirt on somebody's shoe as an alcoholic mother. Like, that's just the judgment that is out there for somebody who's struggling in that way. And so there were times when I felt so guilty and overwhelmed with being the perpetrator in some senses. But I had to switch it to, what can I do now to change things? So it's the forward action of, I can't change the past. How do I invest in them now? Teach them critical thinking. That's the biggest thing I've taught them, because I grew up in a cult. Critical thinking, make your own choices. Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? And how are you going to take responsibility for it?
It's the total opposite of how you grew up.
Yes.
I read where you were taught to put others first. You were taught to live by group think mentality. And again, you said there was no education there. So resources were limited. Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to reinforce the same belief system in a sort of bubble. So if we engage with people outside, it was because we were meant to save them. So that immediately switches the narrative. We're not learning from you. And it gives you a strange superiority, like, I matter, what I believe is better than you, right? And so actually part of the crash after leaving was like, oh, I'm nobody. I'm anybody. I don't matter. Like, we had such a clear shared purpose. And even though it was a bit of a skewed wrong purpose, it was still a shared purpose. And that gives you that collective sense of community and focus. And for that to be taken away, loneliness, you know, completely lost. That was the experience.
You mentioned helping someone. There is a question in the chat room that says, how can we help someone who is embracing victim mentality? Can we flip that? How can we help them flip that switch?
It's tough, and don't take it on yourself. And I know you probably love the person that's close to you and you want to support them. If we see people close to us struggling, all we want is for them to get it, right? But they might not be there yet. So again, leading by example. And I like to ask cheeky, disruptive questions. So when they're in the spiral of like, life's hard, this, blah, 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 I'll be like, what's one thing you're grateful for? Nice. And they're like, huh? Right? And I'm like, and it's just like, hey, sometimes it's cool for me to say it. I learned in positive psychology that it can use a different part of your brain. So I'm applying it to me, and I'm asking a disruptive question. Now, we only have responsibility for ourselves and our behavior. We can't make anyone do anything else. We can provide tools. We can live a life that attracts people to it. I want what they've got. They're like, you don't go to a personal trainer who is overweight, and do you know what I mean? You're like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I trust you. So in the same way, if you want to go to a mental health professional, or if you want to get some advice and support to change your life, you want to follow someone who's living it, who's doing it. So check yourself. How are you living it? And what are small ways, not arrogant ways, that your behavior can teach people rather than what you're telling them?
PVL, your organization, how was that birthed? What happened there?
Oh, I love that question. So I've worked with young people, with kids who'd been kicked out of school, with young offenders. That's how I started my career once I sort of was studying and all of that. And then I was working in mental health organizations, so youth mental health. And then I worked as clinical director for an employee assistance program where workplaces get access to support. And basically, they talked a good game and they were telling other people how to do it. But on the inside, it was toxic. People were losing their jobs for no reason. Like all sorts of crazy stuff was happening. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do the double life where on the outside, we're telling you something. And on the inside, I'm like, this isn't what we're telling people. And so I think it was because of what I'd been through before that made me just have less of a tolerance for, and I learned what I could and I needed to work. And it was, great learning through everything. But the reason PVL was birthed was because I was like, is it possible to create a place that lives and does, the culture that it's telling other people about? So that was really the premise.
And based on what I've read or I've seen in some of your videos, you talk about many of us aren't living a full life, at work, at home. We have a video clip where you speak briefly to the significance of not living a full life. Let's take a look.
So I want to talk about how these global pandemics affect each of us personally. Because what we tend to do is we tend to find all the reasons for why it's too hard or we shouldn't live our fullest life. But I believe the rise in anxiety and depression symptoms are simply because we've been living a half-life for too long. We've been avoiding who we really are and playing up to all the shoulds of who we think we should be in order to survive and stay safe. So that's what I want to talk to you about.
I love it. Living a half-life of what we should be doing. And this ties so into my research on authenticity. Mike is yours. Keep going. You're on a roll. You're on a roll.
So I'm not just talking about myself. I'm talking about clients that I've worked with consistently who have the good life. And, and they would literally come and say, I'm 30 something, and I've got the job and I've got the thing, but I haven't had a child yet, or I'm not in the relationship yet, or I'm not in these external markers for what success looks like. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, all this spiral of poor mental health, right? And so I think the expectations that society puts on us has something to answer for, but also we do for buying into the narrative and kind of going, well, that's hard, it's gonna be scary, I'm risking loneliness or a whole host of things, so I'm just gonna stay safe over here. That's really what I mean, and I see it, and I do think the rise in depression and anxiety is not completely about that, but I think we tell ourselves it's a chemical imbalance, which is sometimes part of the victim narrative. Well, if it's a chemical imbalance, there's not much I can do about it. I'm gonna sit here and watch TV for another 4 hours and eat ice cream. You know what I mean? Yeah. But all these things are impacting how we feel. So I just kind of want to highlight how it all connects together to highlight that radical responsibility point again.
It's powerful, powerful. From the chat room, it says, if you're in a dark period, what would you say is the first step to getting out of that place? First step to getting out of the dark room.
Yeah, I mean, great question. And there isn't a perfect answer because you may want, well, just do this. You'll be good, right? Here's the magic formula. Go on Instagram if you want that answer. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
First of all, don't overthink it. You don't need to have the perfect plan. Okay, for the next 3 months, I'm going to do this and it's all going to be a perfect plan. You don't need that. You probably need to go outside and go for a walk. You probably need to pick up the phone and talk to one person, right? So movement, move your body, and then learn things. Like that was one of the things, like we're in the world of information. People do not appreciate, because I didn't go to school and we were under like embargo. We couldn't learn things about others. So I'm like,
when my son goes to university and we go to some open days because he's at that age, I'm like, the hallowed halls of education. And these days, he's like, chill out, mom. But these days on YouTube, books, from shows like this, like there are 1,000 million different ways that you can learn about what might be going on for you. Read the book, like engage in your own mental health journey, but you won't be ready for that. So if you're in the dark room, start with one thing, go for a walk. I used to listen to a 3-minute guided meditation on my headphones whenever my cortisol, so that stress hormone, was getting up and it was becoming too much. 3 minutes on repeat. Like I would just do that once a day. So whatever it is for you, thank you for your comment. Whatever it is for you.
Look at you multitasking.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is take action. So if you're sitting around thinking about the perfect plan, one action, small, your body, your mind, your soul, these are the steps it's going to take. And you do that 1 time a day, and then you can do it 2 times a day. And then your mind starts opening up to actually making a plan or doing something further.
What do you do when you have one of those days? Because I get the question a lot. You're Mr. Energy, you're up, you're smiling. Do you ever have one of those days? Yes. What do you do? What do you do?
So I should say that I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. So my trauma from the past still affects me now. And so there's a whole host of things that have occurred. And so my nervous system is a lot more sensitive. And my habit to survive can still be to shut off, even bury myself in work, which is perfect because it's purposeful work, right? In order to not sit with difficult feelings. So for me, sometimes I will work because I don't want to sit with a difficult feeling. And then my body will crash. And then I will, for a day, for 2 days, I will probably eat sugar. I will probably just, cry and just be completely crashed out. Now, I've got a great support network of people that try and help me notice before, like you're getting close to that point, maybe we should do some things. And that's a frustrating cycle that I sometimes still do. So I'm not drinking, but I'll turn to sugar. So we all have those little demons that are still with us. This is an ongoing journey of recovery, right? It's not just a one-day thing. But Dr. James, I'm sure you've told your audience before, but what do you do on one of those days?
I'll go pick up one of the books that I've written, and I look for one of the chapters that speaks to that, because I have to live what I give. If I don't do that, since I'm a word person, I believe I forget the name of the author, but 5 love languages, and one of my love languages is words of
affirmation.
Affirmation.
Yeah.
So I've kept a lot of thank you cards and notebooks. So I'll go back and read what people have said in the past, and that usually pulls me out.
Yeah, for me it's people and it's exercise. So
you said people. I have a picture of someone I want to show you. I want you to tell me if this person plays a profound role in your support system. Take a look. How about him? How about him? How does he look? Who is he?
Oh, no one's ever done this before. You aim to surprise. So this is my boyfriend, David. Yes, we've been together for just over 2 years now. And so post-divorce, you have to tell yourself, I'm never going to meet anyone again in order to be brave enough to make that step and be okay with it. And I will say that I manifested this guy. So I literally wrote a list when I felt I was ready to embark on the next step. And, everything was on it. That just happened. But now this sounds like a magical happy ever after story. The reality is, when you're finally in a safe and healthy relationship, that's often when the trauma that you've packed away in order to survive starts coming out. And so little did I know that he would be the safe rock that would allow me to fall apart and actually release and learn about some of the trauma that I've experienced that I was unable to work through therapy even. Or with sometimes it's our relationships that are the therapy, because it's authenticity on an intimate, naked, and I mean that metaphorically as well, level where they see the crap. You guys see this person who's got hair and makeup, they see the person that's like, I can't, what am I doing? Right. And so he's just a beautiful gift in my life to support me as I get to the next level, but also holds me to account to learn so many things.
I love it. I love it. Petra, if folks want to reach you, where can they go? Website, contact information, because people are asking, is this being recorded? They want more of you. So where could they go?
Of course. Well, LinkedIn is my happy place. I'm very active on there. I'm the one involved. So find me, Petra Velzeboer. And my website is just my name, petravelzeboer.com. And that's got everything about what we do. You can reach me there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And yes, this is being recorded. We send out the recording the next day. So tomorrow, keep an eye out for our social media. You'll get Petra 2.0. I mentioned the chat room is blowing up. Someone says, Petra, you mentioned guilt. I'm on a journey to be my best self. I'm doing all the things, but sometimes the guilt from my past catches up with me, and it can be debilitating.
I mean, guilt is so intense and it's a process. But one of the great coaching questions I learned was, what if guilt didn't exist? What decision would I make in this moment if I didn't feel guilty? So I know that seems like you're overriding a feeling and we should listen to our feelings, but that guilt is one that can make us stuck. So we're now going to wallow in the guilt and not take action to move our lives forward. So it just disrupted the narrative for me to go, if guilt didn't exist, what would I do? I would show up for my kids. I would show up for my life, because the other option was unthinkable. So just try and, you can feel guilt and take action. It doesn't have to magically go away before you take action to change your life. That's what I would say. But it's a journey, and be kind to yourself on that journey.
The questions are coming. What's your thoughts on how to recognize and then end that double life?
So one of your first clues is, are you feeling depressed, anxious? A whole host of other symptoms in your body. Are you getting back pain regularly? Headaches? Your physical body is giving you information as well as your mental health. So if those things are going on, they're usually messages that something isn't aligned. Now you can either journal and map out thoughts and feelings on your own to help you figure it out. In what ways am I not living my fullest life? A question like that to prompt you. Or it can be really difficult at the beginning of a journey to ask yourself those questions. So a therapist or a coach or a good friend that you trust and can be real with are just other ways to kind of discuss that stuff, maybe outside of yourself a little bit.
I love it. I love it. The term you used, alignment, and that's what your organization is about. I want to show folks a brief clip on your organization, PVL, so they can get a sense for what went into your thinking and how you brought this group of people together. Let's take a look.
So many different businesses where they were talking a good game, mental health and compassion and supporting people to take responsibility. But internally, the culture was very different. And so I just thought, what if there was a way that we could create a company that actually led by example? So everything we advise businesses to do in thinking about culture, mental health, well-being, we actually lived by and did ourselves. The ripple effect of that on businesses is that each of our facilitators who run training, each person in our team is actually living the approach that they're talking about. And so people can feel that. That's the difference. You can talk about the science of the brain and go and meditate and go and do this, or you can truly come from a heart place and help people experience what you're talking about. That only comes when people are truly authentic and open about their own journey as well.
Maybe change my view of productivity and what that means to me.
It's crucial that we normalize the conversations around mental health. For so many businesses, they start the conversation when there's a crisis. So they've had somebody who's on long-term sick or is suicidal. It's late by then. So we're trying to educate individuals and businesses, and you're normalizing that we all have mental health just like we have physical health. We want to come from a prevention perspective. And over time, when the tough stuff happens, you've already got that foundation in place.
Wow. 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 You getting those goosebumps?
Yes, I am.
Tell us about, how do you recruit for your organization? Because not everyone can work for you. I say sometimes, I wrote a book called The No Excuse Guide to Success. Not everyone can work for me. I'm allergic to excuses. But how do you go about recruiting, and what's the onboarding like? And then there was a question in the chat room, PVL, the name, what does it mean?
Sure. So the name is really quite simple. It's Petra Velzeboer Limited. So it started with me, and we add the company bit to it. How do we recruit? We're still a small team. So we're 6 core people, and then we've got about 10 facilitators that support our training, and growing all the time because the mental health conversation is growing. I go a lot by gut instinct. I know that's not a perfect formulaic answer, but I'm like, do we connect? You know, people talk about culture fit. For me, that's authenticity. And do you have a real connection to the mental health topic? And so everybody in the business has been through something, or not as extreme as me, thankfully, but has some connection to the mental health topic. So that means this matters to them. They also are passionate and want to create change in the world. So we're in that fun stage where need to put a few more processes in place in order to get that structure right. But we do get lots of people asking to work for us now, because they're like, what? I can be myself when I work with you? I'm like, yes, but we all work hard, and we've got a mission that we're trying to create as well.
You mentioned earlier that you speak around the country, around the globe. Types of organizations you speak for, or the conferences? Do you go into your clients and do presentations? Can you give us a
Sure.
snapshot of what that looks like?
Yeah, so we work with a variety of industries, so right through from startups to construction to law firms globally, to media companies. You know, we've got a TV and media company over here. So a whole range of businesses and everything in between. Because I feel like the similarity with all businesses is people, right? People, culture, connection, right? So I speak at conferences, I do keynotes across the globe on the topics of mental health, resilience, my story, a whole host of things. And then the team does a whole host of training, webinars, mental health for leaders, champion programs. And that's the essence of PVL, is how do we help you not only have a strategy, but really live it? You know, if that's the way that we go about our work.
To live it, to sustain the momentum.
Sustain it, absolutely.
Petra, what would you say to a person who has had that traumatic experience, and how to, I guess, be more resilient and not let it impact their daily life as well as other relationships they enter into?
I have to be honest, I'm still on the quest to fully solve the trauma conundrum, because it still shows up for me. But what I will say is, you can't think your way out of it. Now, I want to learn everything, and my safe place is my brain. So if I can just read another book or learn something, I think I can hack it. Unfortunately, trauma is stored in your body, right? So trauma is released from your body. It's through intimate, sort of safe contact with people. It's through, there's different body therapies that you can do as well, dancing, movement, meditation, but be careful with meditation, because for some of us, focusing on your breath can actually re-traumatize. So you need to be creative with how you do some of these things. It's a quest and a journey, but how can we reframe it and go, what is the gift even in our trauma, right? What's the superpower that it's given us, even though we still struggle, I still fall apart, but there's a gift that allows me to still show up. And I can't be egotistical about it, even though I've had some successes, because I still struggle, right? And so it's that, maybe the check and balance. I don't know the perfect answer for it, but there is a gift, and it is part of my superpower. So try and reframe it.
I love it. The wrapping may not be what you want, but the gift inside will be. I love it.
Oh, I've never heard that one. I love it.
Hashtag is yours.
Yes, thank you. So Instagrammable. I love it.
Petra, at the end of your TED Talk, you give people 3 tools to live that life of fulfillment, their full self. They are: practice bravery every day, dare to dream, and experiment. Can you Tell us more about those.
So I think I've mentioned the practice bravery, and that's do that small thing, no matter how small. It's about you. What's your stretch zone? Do something there. What was the second one?
Second one is dare to dream.
Now, when I did my master's degree, now bear in mind, I did it all wrong. I never went to high school. I sort of faked my way through a few things, but I'm very resourceful. I didn't do a regular degree, but somehow I got onto a master's degree. And I would wake up at 3 a.m. to study before my kids woke up, before I went to work, to just get that last bit done. But I would dream, I would visualize the detail of walking across that stage and getting with the cap and the gown and getting the degree, right? And then I've used that in every stage of my life. It's like, okay, what's the big dream? How could I think bigger than my conditioning allows me to? What's possible? But then put in the work today, that's the balance. Big dream, small steps. And what was the final one?
Experiment.
I think I've mentioned that one. It's like, it's not a one size fits all. That's okay. But don't take a passive approach to your life and your mental health. Do the things for you, test, review, reflect, and keep going.
What's next for Petra? You've done so much. What's next, personally and or professionally?
Personally, continue to evolve my relationship. That's become a really big priority for me. And professionally, I've got a book coming out next year. I hope to do many more shows like this, and to just continue to grow the business and grow the impact that we can have across the world.
I want to share the stage with you one day. So I'm going to dream that.
I'll dream it too. We'll make it happen.
We're getting toward the end of the show. Time has flown by, but this is the part of the show where we ask our guests to do a mini keynote, M-I-N-I, a mini keynote. I want you to look in the camera, move a little closer. You're finishing up this phenomenal interview, and I want you to share some parting words, thoughts, a call to action. Just this is their last touch with you. This is the whole recency model. Give them something to think about for the rest of today and tomorrow and so forth. Mic check, mic check. The next voice you hear will be that of Petra V. Go for it.
You matter. No matter what situation you are in right now and what has affected you in your past, you matter, and you are worth putting in the effort and the work that it will take to reach your potential and do something great.
Mic drop, mic drop. You matter. Take your finger, put it, I matter, I matter. Petra, wow, thank you. Can't thank you enough. You, as you said, that naked, vulnerable, authentic, you shared your past, your present, and your future. Can't wait to watch this again. Usually I don't like watching my videos. I don't know who does, but I want to hear you again. This was phenomenal. So thank you for that. For those of you who joined us, keep telling you, informational and transformational. And did you bring somebody this time? Well, I actually shared the link with them tomorrow so they can watch it too. Be back here next week. Bring a friend. Get ready for another journey. Remember, I always say, we provide informational and transformational experiences. We'll see you next week. And don't forget, you've just been Jim Packer.